I'm reenacting is John Anderson. In real life, I'm John Anderson's 6th great grandson. So John Anderson built this blockhouse for him and his family to live as a pioneer here in Scott County. And he did not realize that this blockhouse would become one of the main waypoints along the Daniel Boone Wilderness Trace. But in fact it would, and so groups of settlers would stay here for a week or longer as they would collect a group large enough to complete the rest of the treacherous journey. You know, the main thing that you realize when you stand in this house, and the thing that I think is beautiful, is you realize how well it was built, and you realize that it was really built for one thing, and that thing was defense, and to protect his family and the settlers that were coming through. So you can see the small holes in the walls, and particularly the fact that the house is very unique because it's wider on the top than on the bottom. That would allow to protect from attackers, particularly those who are trying to burn down the house. So one of the main defensive measures is the ability to protect from Indians who might be trying to burn the house down. And that's really one of the main features. It's really amazing to stand in here and just imagine what their life would be like.
It is the 250th anniversary of Boone's trip, where he blazed the trail with his 30 axe people into Kentucky. And we're reenacting that over the next 45 days. It started in Kingsport on the 23rd. It'll end in Boonesboro on the 7th. And there are celebrations planned all along the way. This is the second of the celebrations. We're going to have another one at Wilderness Road. There's one at Cumberland Gap. There's one in Middlesboro, and on up the trail till you get to Fort Boonesboro. The trail was a route into Kentucky, and the reason people went was to get land. But they didn't just give away the land. You actually had to agree to certain conditions in order to claim the land up there. First thing you did when you went up the trail was go to the land office at Fort Boonesboro and register, and they had it laid out in tracts, and then you had to sign a form and agree to certain acts, like you had to join the militia and agree to defend the fort, defend the settlement. You had to plant a garden, particularly you had to have corn to supply them with food. You had to agree to the courts because there wasn't any formal government up there. So they had their own court, and you had to agree to abide by the decision of the court. You had to agree to their game laws. They had game laws at that time to protect the game in that area. Build a cabin and stay there for at least a year. And if you agreed to all their terms, they'd give you 40 acres. And that's why everybody went, is they wanted land. And so over the course of about 30 years, about 200 to 300,000 people walked this trail. And this was the main western trail at that time into Kentucky and the Midwest, was this direction. The other route they took was the river route, so you could float the Ohio, or you could go to Kingsport and float into Middle Tennessee on the Holston and the Tennessee rivers. But this was the overland route, and we're doing settlement reenacted, demonstrating a lot of the things that you had to do and have to know how to do. If you were going to make this trek, you had to be very self-sufficient. And we're showing here how to make salt, how to salt brine water. They're showing soap, the seeds in the garden, the food prep, the flax, because they didn't have a lot of cotton. So you made your clothing out of flax. It took about an acre of flax to do one little shirt. So you had to know how to do the flax process, which we're demonstrating up there.
Okay.
But that's what we're doing today.
Now, what about this time capsule that y'all are going to be having buried here?
Well, this is the 250th anniversary of the trail. So we've got a little time capsule. We're going to put some of the things that we're creating today in there. The visitors who come in today are signing in, and we're going to put their names in it so that they can decide when, 25 or 50 years, the 300th anniversary. If they dig up the time capsule, they'll have a snapshot of what we did here today.
Well, my name is Daniel Boone. I am originally from Pennsylvania, But I'm here on the route to Kentucky, the trace that is named after me. And we are here, we're probably about 200 miles or so from the fort that's being constructed over in Fort Boonesboro, named after yours truly. So I'm leading some settlers on the path that way. And we're here gathering some supplies before we make the final push to Cumberland Gap.
Which is, I'm a chicken. Works for that. Yeah, right. They want a chunky yarn. How much twist I put in it, and I can thicken it up and just kind of whatever we want. Now, fibers definitely take each one is different. You have two sheep of the same breed, but they're going to have different wool. So you just kind of learn to let the fiber speak to you. And I never buy fiber and then plan on what I want it for. Like, say I want a sweater. I don't typically buy fiber for the sweater. I spin fiber in my life, and one of them will tell me if it wants to be sweater.
We do. I don't have
that's straight from
at the park. I know it's farm, not even.
This is
guns here. That's a long rifle, and that's a musket. This is actually a reproduction of the British brown bess land pattern. That was the standard weapon of the British Army for about 150 years. And it was what was used by the British in the Revolutionary War. Prior to the war, during the War of the French and Indian War, when the colonial militia were called up, they were issued brown bess muskets. And then, of course, when that war was over and these militia came home, a lot of them just kept this brown bess. So early on, some of the colonial militia had brown bess muskets, but then later the long rifle came into play, and this musket has got a 78 caliber smoothbore barrel. The rifle's got a 50 caliber rifle barrel. The musket has an effective range of about 50 yards. The rifle has an effective range of about 200 yards. The musket doesn't foul as easily, so you can get off more shots before you have to clean the barrel. It was ideal for the type of land warfare that was carried out in Europe. Now later on, when the French aligned with the early colonial government, the French Charleville musket, which is basically similar to this brown bess, became the standard land pattern weapon for the Continental Army. You had to have a powder horn. Now this is used to carry your powder supply. A lot of times you'll see someone charging the barrel from the horn. You don't do that. If you try that, you don't know how much powder you're putting in there. There's a little charging horn, which is this right here. And that holds the exact amount of powder that's needed for the brown bess musket, 78 grains. Usually it uses a 78 caliber bullet, and usually the number of grains equals the caliber of the bullet. But you charge the barrel with that, and then you put a patch ball down. You have a shot bag that you use to carry your essentials in it. You carry your shot, carry your patches, which is usually a piece of linen with bear grease on it. You also have a flint and steel to build a fire with. Essential things you need. Most of the time they carry a built axe, sometimes called a tomahawk, but they're more of a utility weapon. You know, in Hollywood you see them throwing tomahawks at people. Well, if you're going to use it as a weapon, you don't want to throw it away. You want to hang on to it. These are haversacks, carry some of the other essentials in, and that's about it. This is a heavier duty haversack here for carrying supplies for a long trek. Wooden bowls. This spoon here is made out of horn. Tin cup. Tin was used because it didn't corrode. Copper and brass corrode. You don't want to use that for any eating material, drinking materials. And they had little pouches that they carried, little copper pouches that they, tins that they carried tobacco in, but those were lined with silver solder because copper and brass corrode and give off toxic fumes. You got belt knife. These are all handmade. Got a bone handle. These are used, can be used as a defensive weapon, but primarily they're used for skinning wild game. Most frontiersmen wore moccasins. They made their own. Back in the day, in the 18th century, there was a lot of elk in this area. Elk hides make much better moccasins because the leather is thinner, thicker than white-tailed deer, and it wears better. So they made their own moccasins. A pair of moccasins will last about 2 weeks.
Agree to certain conditions. You had to agree to join the militia to defend the place, and you had to agree to abide by the court's rulings, because it wasn't part of the United States. There was no government other than what they set up. You had to agree to build a cabin on the land. You had to agree to plant a garden and a crop, particularly corn, to use. They were trying to build a city. But if you did, they'd give you 40 acres. So that's why everybody is to get the land. They had it surveyed into plots, and you would register for certain plots. And if there were more people, then they'd have a lottery. But that's why they went. Everybody needed or wanted land. Brine water, and this boiled it down. Salt was the commodity that everybody needed. They even used it as currency because they used it. They didn't have refrigeration, so if they were going to preserve food, they used salt. And they used it to tan hides. And they used it for all kinds of things. And they found it by following the buffalo trails or the elk trails, because the animals could always find their salt springs. And they gather the water and just boil it down until they got to the salt. So that's one of the things that they had to take with them, or did take with them on their trek. This is the Boone trace that goes up through here from Kingsport to Fort Boonesboro. And if you were on the trail, you had to have certain things. And the seeds and flax to make your clothing. They didn't have cotton, so they used flax to do it. 1 acre of flax would make a shirt like this. And the process they're demonstrating over there, if you saw it, is an involved process. If you've never tasted Saltville salt, you need to try a little bit, because it is the pure thing. Do you know what time it is?
I don't know.
To do is go to the land office. There's a land office inside Boonesboro, and you will sign up for a parcel of land, which will be roughly about 40 acres. You can't choose the 40 acres that you want. They will assign 40 acres to you in a lottery draw. So once you get your land, you have to agree to occupy it for one thing and live on it for a year. First thing you want to do is build your cabin. Obviously, you need shelter at the beginning. And then what you want to do is plant a garden. And these are requirements. These aren't optional. So that's what we have the seeds for. You also have to agree to join the militia to help protect the settlement. You have to agree to respect religious freedom of all people. You have to agree to the game laws of the area for hunting. And you have to abide by the court's rulings. So what we have here are seeds for your garden, and these are called the Three Sisters. It is a Saluya corn, a Georgia winter squash, and Cherokee trail beans. And they're called the Three Sisters because they're usually planted together because the corn gives support for the beans to grow up. And then you'll need flaxseed because you'll take this flax, somebody will take this flax and spin it into linen for you to make your clothing. And then these are Kentucky wildflowers to beautify your space. These are wildflowers. They're poppies, phlox, cornflower, and black-eyed Susans, along with some others, but those are the main ones.
Okay.
So we are offering these seeds to you to take on your trip.
Thank you.
Thank
Where
you.
did those come from?
And you be safe on that trip. And watch out for those weeds.
Will do.
Molten lead. Pour it in there, let it cool off a little bit here. Let it hit the ground, that really dissipates that heat real well.
Do I look odd to you? What's your name?
Trim the excess off. Let it cool off there.
Hi there.
And you have a musket ball.
Cool. So what's the ingredients that you're using to make the soap and everything?
So we're using lard, lye, and water. Okay. So we cheated on every one of them. We got commercially available products. We're using distilled water. It needs to be rainwater if it's the Pioneer Days. If you got water that's got minerals in it, it's gonna mess your soap up.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, you then you want about by weight 2 parts water to 1 part lye. Okay, if you're making it the way we did. If you're making it the Pioneer way, you put your ashes in a bucket that has a few holes in the bottom. You put a filter in the bottom, pine straw, regular straw, with the ashes on top of it. Pour boiling water in it and catch it in a second bucket underneath.
Okay. Gotcha.
And when you got a gallon or two in the lower bucket that is a yellowish brown, then you boil that. And when you lye water, and that's very noxious fumes, so you got to do it outside, away from kids and so forth. Once your lye water's boiled down until you put an egg in it and the egg floats, a little bit of the egg breaking the surface, you have the strength you want, okay, on your lye water.
Okay.
With this, we're two parts water, 1 part lye.
Traveling across the wilderness to get to Kentucky, folks ate very simply. They mostly ate meat. If they were fortunate enough to have some flour with them, they could make bread, flour or corn flour. But they ate a whole lot of meat. We are here at the Anderson's blockhouse, so we have a little bit more access to other things. We cooked up some buffalo stew and sourdough bread and blackberry cobbler, and our bellies are full.
And so that it's called Three Sisters. You never heard of that. Nice. Okay. And then we have flaxseed, and you'll need to grow this in order to be able to spin into linen so you can make your clothing warm. That's your jar. And then these are Kentucky wildflowers to beautify your cabin. So we have there's poppies, black-eyed Susan.